Tutorial, I'm going to be taking you through how to set everything up in your Buzzsprout. Now, Buzzsprout is a hosting platform for podcasts. Essentially, you need to have your podcast hosted somewhere, and then what you do is you then hook the different directories up to your host, which I'm going to go through in this video, and then the host, every time you publish a new episode to your host, you are then going to get that sent out to your that will be sent out to the directory. So I'm going to go through everything right from the beginning. So first of all, you're going to go to this website here, buzzsprout.com, and I'm going to click over here for get started for free. Now, Buzzsprout does have a free plan which lasts 90 days, and what is great about this is it gives you that 3 months to really decide whether or not podcasting is for you, and if you're enjoying the platform, if you're enjoying the medium, etc., which I absolutely love. Now, after 90 days, if you do not upgrade to a paid for plan, then your episodes will get deleted after the 90-day period. So they all end up with a counter on them, and they count down to 90 days, and they will no longer be hosted in episode directories or filed in episode directories. So you will lose those older episodes. However, your podcast will keep going because it will still continue to be hosted for free. But if you want your entire back catalogue to continue to be hosted by Buzzsprout and sent out to directories and stay live on directories, then you will need to upgrade to a paid plan, which at the moment in time of recording this in March 2023, I pay, for example, $12 per month for my hosting through Buzzsprout, and with that I get 3 hours every single month of hosting time, which 3 hours might not sound like enough, but actually if you're doing 30-40 minute episodes, that is plenty for you to be putting out 4 episodes a month, probably with a couple of bonus if you really want to go that way as well. And if you're doing 20-minute episodes, again, absolutely plenty. So first of all, I'm going to click up here, get started for free, and I'm going to type in some info about me. I'm going to have to use a different email address. I'll just put in my spam email address because I've already got my normal podcast through my website. I'm just gonna do the little verification, create my podcast. I'm gonna create my password as well, which hopefully I won't forget that later. And which one already describes you? You're going to go for I am a new podcaster here. Now, podcast title, you can change this at any time. So it's immediately just going to give you Verity's podcast because I've already said that my name is Verity. But let's say that we're going to call it the most amazing podcast ever, just for argument's sake. And then I'm also going to type in a description. Now, it's okay if you don't have your description completely down yet. This is something that you can work on and you can edit as you go. But let's just, for the sake of argument, this podcast is aimed at 20 to 30 year olds who want to know more about the life of Britney Spears. I don't know, something completely random. Anyway, done. Let's start podcasting. So you will come to this page and you can see at the top here, it's saying that they have sent an email to my spam account. I'll need to verify my email address and then I can click resend if needed. But more importantly, let's go through our dashboard here. So first of all, and this is the page that you will always see whenever you log into Buzzsprout, is your episode page. So you can upload a new episode, and I will show you how to do that in a bit, but I'm just going to run through everything first of all so you can see what we've got. So this is your episodes here. We've got players, and these are how you can show your audio player to your website. I will show you how to set that up as well. You get a website included in your Buzzsprout package as well. Directories, how to hook them up to directories. We will go through that. Monetization, your podcast info, and your stats as well. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to verify my email address just so that we can access all of the features and I can show you how to do everything properly. You can see it's now coming up with thanks for verifying your email address. That won't come up all of the time. But first of all, we are going to set up your podcast info. So I'm going to come across here to podcast info, click on it, and you will see that my title is there, and I can change that as many times or as often as I want. And here is where I was saying that you can also edit your podcast description. Now, what's important in your podcast description is this is going to be one of the first things that your potential listener is going to see about your podcast. So if I pull up Apple Podcasts, for example, and I pull up the Confident CEO podcast bottom here, and you can see that's there that everybody can see. And oh look, someone's left me a 1-star rating. That's not very nice. Anyway, that we've got we've got the about info all put there, and then we've got further information which I will show you how we will submit. So you can change your podcast description as often as you want. What you need to remember is that a lot of podcast directories won't format this though. So if you start putting things on multiple lines like this, the podcast directory won't care. It will just push it all up as one paragraph. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Your podcast artwork, you are going to create in Canva or wherever you're going to create it. You can actually click on here and be taken straight through to, creating it with Canva. You'd have to go through their cookie policy and what have you, just so that you agree to that. Or you can just select a file, go to downloads, and let's just say, for argument's sake, that's just a picture of me, but just for argument's sake, that's going to be my podcast artwork, and I can again change that as often as I would like. So if you create some podcast artwork originally and you're thinking that's no longer suiting my show, you can change it. That's not a problem. Or you can have like a temporary one maybe for if there's something coming up and you want to really support a cause or something. Your podcast category is pivotal. You need to make sure that you properly research your podcast category so that you know exactly where you are going to put your podcast. Now, some of the directories will only list you in one category, others will list you in up to 3. So I always say that it is worthwhile clicking here, add optional categories, and selecting the full 3 categories. It says here Apple Podcasts only uses the first categories, but as I said, other directories may use additional categories as well. So if you are creating a business podcast, for example, so the Confident CEO podcast sits in business entrepreneurship, but then I've also got it listed in business, and I think I've got it in, is it marketing or management? But one of the two. It could also be under education how-to because, it is how-to tips. But there are so many here, and I would really recommend that you take the time to decide where your podcast is going to sit. But on saying that, don't just pick random ones for the sake of it. You see a lot of people, for example, putting things in marketing business or business marketing because it is a very popular category. However, the problem that you then have with that is that you are competing against a lot of other podcasts. So if something like ranking in the charts is important to you, that is going to end up being quite competitive. Whereas if you were able to really niche down your category, that might be better for you. So really consider where you are going to sit your podcast. But just for the sake of today, I'm just going to select these random 3. My language, I'm in the United Kingdom, so I'm going to change it to that, but again, whatever works for where you are. And your time zone, again, I'm in the UK, so oh gosh, I'm going completely the wrong way. Where is it? I can't see it. There we go. London. That'll do me. Artist, that is you as the host, so I'm Verity Songon. And explicit material, does this podcast contain explicit material? If you're swearing, yes. If not, no. Now, that is something you can also change by episode. So as a general rule, I do not have this box ticked. However, I do sometimes tick it on individual episodes if there is swearing or profanities in the individual episode. I've seen a lot of people ask before, if I tick this, will my podcast be downgraded? No, it won't, but you do need to, you've got a responsibility as a content creator that if you're putting out content which has got swearing in it, you have got the responsibility of letting your audience know that there are profanities, because then they can take the the decision as to whether or not they're going to listen to that podcast. Or it could just be something as simple as, yes, they will listen to it, but they won't listen to it when their kids are in the car with them, or something like that. It's like when you buy a CD back in the day, when you buy a support CD back in the day and it had the parental advisory written on it. It probably didn't stop you buying the CD, but it did make you think about when or who was in your company when you listened to the CD there. So once I've done all of that, I'm going to click save the episode information, and then I'm going to go across to advanced, and you can see that this is updated here as well. So I'm going to go across to advanced. Now, what type of podcast are you doing? Are you doing episodes or is it a series? And you can tick whichever is relevant to you. What's your website address? We want to type that in. We want to send people to our website if needed. So episode limit, do you want them to show all episodes or just the most recent ones? Now, personally, I would say show all episodes, because you want people to be able to go through your back catalogue and listen to as much of your content, because that's going to contribute to more downloads. What I often see, and it never ceases to amaze me, that every single week when I get my podcast stats through, is I would say at least half of the stats are not made up of the most recent episode. They are made up of some of the episodes going right back to the very, very beginning. So that's worth bearing in mind, that you do want to have everything as available as possible for people to listen to. Your keywords, think of search engine optimization. Now, what kind of keywords are people going to be using to search for your podcast? Statistically, like the second or third top way that somebody's going to discover your podcast is through going through the podcast directory and typing in a keyword to look up something that they want to listen about on a podcast. So you really need to think about what keywords or which keywords you're going to be using, and not just typing in any old random thing. Think about those long tail keywords as well. What is the search engine going to pick up essentially? So for example, for the Confident CEO podcast, I might be having things like business tips and tricks. Oh, I can't type. I might have female entrepreneur. Really can't type this morning. Whole variety of things. You can have a maximum of 12 keywords. You don't have to use the whole 12, but I would encourage you to. Is the podcast about a specific location? So for something like the Confident CEO podcast, no, it is not. But if I was doing, reviews of Jersey restaurants, then yes, because that would actually be quite relevant, and people who don't live in Jersey or aren't visiting Jersey might not be interested in listening to that. And then you can, type in the location, for example. Okay. Copyright, you want to make sure that you write out whoever you are, which that is included there. It will automatically populate it for you, and then it will copyright the most amazing podcast ever, as I've called this one. And lock feed from transfer, I would recommend keeping this ticked, because what this is doing is, as it says here, do not allow other podcast hosts to import my podcast. This is really important from a piracy point of view. You want to make sure that other people can't import your podcast and try and pass it off as their own work. Going to click save podcast info, and as you can see here, it says that it can take up to 24 hours to see changes in podcast directories and apps. So just clicking that there. Right, going across to hosts and co-hosts, you can, if you've got can't even talk. If you've got a variety of hosts and co-hosts, you can actually add them in to your podcast. If it's normally just you though as the host, then you don't need to do this if you don't want to, but you can just click add, and you can enter that, you can do this for yourself, or you can do this for, anybody if they're the host or co-host with you there. Right, so that is now our podcast info all set up. So what I'm going to do next is come across to our website. Let's do our website next so we can set this up. Now, Buzzsprout will give you two links here, your podcast website and also your share page. So I'm just going to open those up so you can see the difference, because they do look a bit different. Obviously, you wouldn't have your podcast artwork looking like that. But this is the first link for your podcast, and your episode would all appear here. At the moment, we don't have any directory set up. We've only got the RSS feed, but all of the other directories will then come into here. And then for the share one, rather than having all the episodes, it is just saying where you can listen to all of the different episodes there. The one that I normally give people is this link, which is the podcast website. Within the podcast website, you can really go to town and change this as much as you want. You can change your colour to match your branding. So that's the hex colour that I tend to use. Oops. Oh gosh. So there we go. We can change the branding there. I can upload an image to go on the back here instead if I prefer. I can have a look at how my share page then looks as well. There's not too much editing that you really do on this page, but you know, it's a nice one to have, particularly if you also haven't got your own website or you haven't got a web page set up. What we can do if we come across to social media links, you can then add in your Facebook page, your Twitter page, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Now, it does kind of stress me out that they don't have TikTok on here. We know how popular TikTok is, but I'm hoping that that is something that Buzzsprout will add on eventually. And what happens when you put all of these links in, I'll just come across to my podcast page, as you can see that the links then all appear at the top. And if I go down to the bottom, all the way to the bottom. Oh, they don't appear down the bottom anymore, but you can see that they all appear at the top there. Website URL. This is if you want to personalize your Buzzsprout URL. So where you can see mine is podcast.veritysongon.com as opposed to buzzsprout.com/ a load of numbers or what have you. And you can also, what you can do if you want to personalize it, you can use these different options. If you want to just leave it like this, that is also absolutely fine. You can put that in your link tree or, you know, link from your website, not a problem at all. You can personalize it, so then it's automatically giving me the example of my podcast name .buzzsprout.com, or you can use a custom domain, which is what I have done, and I have done the subdomain of podcast.veritysongon.com. If you want to use either of those, this is the easiest one to set up. If you want to use a custom domain, then Buzzsprout can support you to do that yourself, but it's completely up to you and how you want to work that there. Finally, you've got hide from search engines. If you want to hide your Buzzsprout website from search engines, then you can click that there. Ordinarily, I would say you don't want to do that, but if you've maybe got a private podcast or just, I don't know, for any other reason you don't want it to be found in search engines, then you're going to want to tick that there. And obviously any changes that you make sure you hit save changes. So that's our podcast info, and that is our website setup. And you can go in and you can change these things as often and as much as you want. Just bear in mind, it will update on your podcast website almost instantly, but it will take up to 24 hours to change in Apple Podcasts and other podcast directories. So talking of that, let's go across to directories and get that sorted. So first of all, they've given us a little checklist. So check your inbox and verify your email address. We've done that. Specify a podcast artist. We've done that. That's me as the host. Add at least one podcast category. We did that. Add a podcast description. They want us to put at least one episode on, so we'll do that in a second. And upload original podcast artwork. So we haven't quite completed the checklist. So what we're going to do is go across to episodes so that we can upload an episode. So I'm going to hit episode, and I'm going to press upload a new episode here. And it's telling me to just drag or choose an audio file. So I'm just going to go across and grab something quite random. Do I have an MP3? Here we go. I've got a random MP3 here that I'm just going to drag. In. So success, your audio file has been uploaded. Now I'm going to call it something which is going to entice my listeners into this episode. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. I personally like to create my episode titles to include keywords because that is how people are most likely going to find me through search engine optimization. So I want to use keywords. However, there are plenty of other examples where people use very random names for their podcast. For example, if you think about TV things, you think of Friends, they were all called The One Where or The One That, for example. So you can call your episode anything you like, but let's start off just calling it My First Amazing Episode. And then if there's somebody featuring it, I also like to add in at the end with, I don't know, Gareth Gates. Anyone remember him? I don't know why he randomly came to my mind. My episode description, these are my show notes. So within my show notes, I want to be giving a brief overview as to what the podcast episode is containing. Think of your podcast show notes, your episode description as almost like a blurb. You think of a blurb at the back of a book. So you're going to be explaining what is in this episode, and there's no real right or wrong way of doing this. Some people like to use the entire 4,000 characters and really go in depth. Other people like to keep it much shorter and simpler. Now, if you look at mine as an example, I'm just going to pull up my latest episode, you can see that I keep my show notes quite, just bullet points, quick overview. That's all that works for me. I then include my guests links, and I've then got some things set up as a footer, and I will show you how to set up a footer in a second. But just to come across to Apple Podcasts, I'll show you what this looks like. Oh, I don't want it to start playing. I want to open it up. And you can see that this is how it formats in Apple Podcasts there. Okay. So if we come back to this, you're then going to write out whatever works for you for your show notes. And you might want to play around with different styles. I've written long ones, I've written short ones. What I would recommend you doing is, again, optimizing your show notes with keywords. I would not recommend keyword stuffing, but just thinking about what kind of keywords might people want to be looking for, what is going to draw them into this episode. You can include hyperlinks as well. You can do bullet points, numbering, and you can italicize and put in bold as well. So there's quite a bit that you can do there to make it look as you want it. But do remember that different podcast directories will read it however they want to read it. So for example, here, none of this gets, these different things are in bold, and my podcast website, Apple Podcast, doesn't put them in bold. So it's just worth remembering that. The other thing that they do is in Buzzsprout is they give you an episode footer. I love this feature. I think this is an absolute game changer of a feature, because when we click on it, as it explains, your episode footer, this will show at the bottom of all of your episodes. So again, if I come across to here, this section for me, podcast services and free download links and other links, this is all in my Buzzsprout footer. So I don't need to enter any of this information every single time that I create a new episode or new show notes. It is all in my Buzzsprout footer, and I simply click save changes, and depending on how many episodes, it will have the episode number there, and it stays the same across every single episode. So if you then have a website change or a new offer that you want to add in, you go into your footer on any of your episodes, edit it, and then press save changes, and it will change it across every single episode, which I think is such a game changer. It's amazing. Gone are the days where we were having to think, oh my gosh, on which episode did I put that website link in, and I no longer sell that course or provide that service. You can just have it in your footer, which I think is absolutely amazing. Coming down a little bit, episode artwork. If you're going to use the same episode artwork for every single one, just leave it there. Or you can select file if you want to have an individual episode artwork piece for this particular episode. If you're doing it in seasons, you're going to type in the season number there. If you're just doing continuous episodes, you don't need to worry. You can just leave that blank, and also the episode number. And what I quite like about this is that as you go through, Buzzsprout actually says your last episode was episode number whatever, so that you can remember to put in the next number, you know where you're up to. For your episode type, you can then tick, is it a full episode, so a normal episode essentially? Is it your trailer? We'll talk about trailers elsewhere in this course. Or is it a bonus episode? So you can decide which one is relevant. And this is where I was saying as well, if you are like me, where you have ticked to say that your podcast does not have explicit content normally, but maybe for this one episode you did swear, you can just tick that box. And all that means is that it comes up, let's see if I can find an example in Apple Podcasts, but it just means that, can you see this little E that comes up, that it just lets your audience know that there is explicit language in there. You've then got some additional options that you can go through. So if you have got, so automatically populates with your name as the artist. They call artist host, the host, the artist here. But you might want to say, and I don't know, We said Gareth Gates, didn't we? That was a bit random. Some of you might be wondering who the heck Gareth Gates is. But anyway, pop that in there. And then you can also include a short summary. This is what is going to be seen right at the top here. So in this episode, we are joined by. So in this episode, we discuss, and you're just going to have a very short summary of one sentence, essentially. If you've got a custom episode web page, what some people like to do on individual websites is they will create a whole page just for their episode. So you can pop that in there. Or what you can do is on your Buzzsprout page, you can copy that link across as well and put that in there, but that's not necessary. And then tags, again, think of these like keywords, any keywords which are relevant to your episode you want to be popping in there, and really thinking about those SEO keywords that people are searching for. Once you've filled out all that information, you can decide you're going to leave that unpublished, and then you can just publish when you're ready. You can click publish immediately and it will immediately be pushed out to directories, or you can press schedule for the future. This is what I like to do. My episodes go out Wednesday first thing in the morning. So for me, I would just be selecting the day and time and then pressing save episode details. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it unpublished at the moment. But if this was scheduled, this date would be orange. And if I'd hit publish immediately, it would be green. You can see as well here that the downloads number comes up. It tells me how many downloads I have per episode, and also the duration of my MP3 recording, and up here it now tells me how much longer I have got left in this content cycle. If I want to edit anything, I can just click on the little pen. It takes me back and I just edit anything that I would like to within there. I can share the episode with to Facebook and Twitter, and I can also see the individual stats for the episode. So that's quite a bit that we've gone through, but that's episodes. So now we're going to go back over to directories. Oh, it's because I haven't actually published it yet. Let's just publish that for the sake of... There you go. I love this because it gives you a little excitement there. So there we go. My first episode is published. Beautiful. Let's go across to directories, and now you can get yourself listed in all of these different directories. As an absolute minimum, and I mean an absolute minimum, go for Apple Podcasts and Spotify. These are the two biggest directories where people will listen to your podcast. I think it's something like just over 40% of people listening to podcasts will use Apple Podcasts. It's around 20 to 30% will use Spotify. And all of these other ones, even Google Podcasts and Amazon Music, are 1% of listeners max use those different directories. I think Amazon Music at the time of recording is only something like 0.5% of podcast listeners will listen through Amazon Music. It's not to say don't use them, but what I am saying is don't neglect Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The good thing as well is when you get listed on Apple Podcasts, you will automatically then put onto Overcast, Castro, Castbox, Podfriend, and Good Pods as well. Now, different podcast directories will take different lengths of times to register. Personally, I have always had them register within a couple of hours of loading them and getting them set up, but it isn't uncommon for Apple Podcasts in particular to take up to a couple of weeks to register. So if it doesn't happen instantaneously, that's not necessarily you. It could just be how you've got caught up in a queue somewhere along the line, so that's not to worry about. To get listed on the different directories, just click get listed, and Buzzsprout here actually gives you all of the instructions that you need. You just need to go through these step-by-step instructions. So I'm not going to go through them all individually because it's just kind of doubling up on the information you've got. You've got all of the criteria there, and if you do reach out to Buzzsprout, they are incredibly helpful there as well. And then you can do exactly the same, and like I said, if you click the buttons, it tells you exactly what to do. But personally, I would say get listed on as many as you possibly can, because even if you're thinking, well, only one person will listen to me on that could be the one person who becomes your biggest raving fan and buys all your products and services that you've advertised. You never know. I think as well on that note that it's Amazon Music You can't on Buzzsprout actually submit to Amazon Music until you've got a paid for account with them. So that's just worth bearing in mind. But once you get them set up, then that is that done. You can also click here for your RSS feed, and you've got your RSS feed should you need that for any future, say if you're setting up an RSS feed email, for example. So we've covered loads here so far. We've done your podcast info, episodes, directories, website. I'm now going to go across to players. And these are your players that you can then embed onto your website. So this is just the standard green Buzzsprout that comes up with, but you can click on customize your players up here. You can change your colors, for example, to, you know, whatever you want, just to match your branding. You can change how it looks. You know, you can really have a good play around here and how do you want them to. Change your artwork, episode, no artwork at all, completely up to you. And if you click on the multiple episodes one as well, and then that will show how the different episodes, you know, all of your different episodes. And like I said, you can get it all changed and however you want it to fit with your branding. Hit save, and then back to admin as well. So it's completely up to you how you want them to look, but then you just copy that embed code and you can use that in your website. So that's all of those bits there. And then finally, we're going to come across to stats. Now, there's not actually going to be pretty much any stats because obviously we've only just published an episode and it is not being listened to by anybody. But what you will see in here is, first of all, a podcast overview. So this will tell you, and you can click on how many downloads have you had in the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, all time, or you can do a custom set date to date. Why are these important? Well, because the first 7 days, depending on what numbers you hit, will tell you if you're like a top 50 podcast, top 25 podcast, etc. The last 30 days is important because if you're looking at monetizing and getting in sponsorships, a lot of people will want to know what or how many downloads, or listens have you had in the last 30 days. And you know, but that's also just for your interest ads there. You can come across to episode downloads and you can look at your downloads amount per episode. Apps and devices. Now this obviously isn't set up because we haven't had any downloads yet, but it will tell you which is the most used app to listen to your podcast, this top device, the top category, and your devices. Now this is really important, particularly for devices, because if people are primarily listening to you on a phone, for example, that's telling you that you need to make sure that any website that you are putting your podcast on is, you know, set up and is mobile optimized. Your top app as well, that is going to be telling you, you know, where your listeners are pretty much listening from, and again how you can optimize depending on where, you know, which app is being used. And you can break that down from last episode, last 5 episodes, last 10 episodes, and all episodes. You can look by location as well, which I find this absolutely fascinating. But again, what's really interesting about this is when it comes to your offers, you can start seeing where people are. You might want to, you know, and depending on what kind of offers you're putting out there, if you're finding that people are mainly listening in a country that you're not from, that might make you adjust the timings that you put out your podcast episodes, or the currencies that you sell in, for example. Not necessarily, but it's interesting. And depending on your podcast, depending on your business, that information could be super useful for you. And again, you can break it down by last episode, last 5 episodes, last 10 episodes, or all episodes. You've also got these achievements, which I absolutely love. It tells you how old your podcast is, literally down to the minute. And then you also get told what is your total number of downloads. And Buzzsprout gives you these little achievements, and it always tells you how much more you need to do to get to the next achievement. So it's telling me here I've currently got none, and as soon as I get my 10 downloads, it sends me like a little email and a little badge that I can put on social media and go, yay, I've got my first 10 downloads, which is an amazing feeling, I have to say. And then here as well, you can see that once I publish 4 more episodes, then it'll give me a little achievement badge for publishing 5 episodes there. So those are my stats. So that is everything for, let's click on episodes to go back. That is everything for Buzzsprout. Oh, that's a point to make. Because I'm on the free plan, you can see here how it says, since you're on the free plan, this episode will be deleted in 90 days. Now, tomorrow that will turn to 89 days. And if I publish another episode tomorrow, that will say 90 days, and it counts down each episode individually. So this will give me a great 3 months to be able to figure out if I like Buzzsprout, if I want to continue using this platform, if I like podcasting, want to continue. Or what I can do here is just go upgrade to save, and it gives me the different points that I can go through right from the beginning. The benefits of upgrading is that you don't get ads on your podcast website. So when we go to the podcast website, you can see me. For mine, it is absolutely clean. There's nothing there apart from my episodes. On the free plan, there will be some kind of advert that will come up here, which you can't get rid of until you pay Buzzsprout, basically. They also give you more storage as well. You can import a podcast across if you're coming across from another provider. And you've also got this magic mastering that you can add on, depending, and the price of that depends. It's an add-on, so if you don't want it, you don't have to use it. But if we go across to clicking on Magic Mastering, what this does is if you're starting to see or feel that actually this is what your audio constantly looks like, and it is absolutely doing your head in to fix it all the time. You know, somebody's really loud and then somebody's really quiet and then something's even louder. What Magic Mastering does is it just puts everything at the same audio level for you. It takes literally seconds. Buzzsprout does it all for you. You just upload it, click yes to Magic Mastering, and then it's just one less thing that you're trying to sort out in the editing point, and you can optimize it depending on whether or not it is spoken words or if you have got mostly music in your podcast. So that is a fantastic feature. However, it might not fit for your needs, and if it doesn't, then you don't need to worry. You don't need to worry about it there. But generally speaking, if you are happy to deal with the ads on the podcast website, personally, what I would recommend is actually just saving yourself what that'll come to $36 and just host everything for free for the first 90 days until you've got yourself more established, unless you actually need the full 3 hours. That's what I did. I ran mine free for the first 90 days, and then just before everything expired, I upgraded to the $12 per month plan, and that does me absolutely fine. So this has been a really intense video talking about how to, do everything with Buzzsprout basically, but I'm hoping that you found it really, really useful, and you can stop it, you can go back at any time to just make sure that you get your Buzzsprout set up in the most optimal way for your podcast.